October 24th, 1935, 10:15 p.m., Palace Chop House, Newark, New Jersey. A small restaurant with checkered tablecloths and dim lights, cigarette smoke hanging in the air, the sound of laughter from the back room, cards on the table, whiskey glasses half empty. In 15 seconds, 4 men would be shot. In 22 hours, an empire would collapse. And Harlem, 30 miles north, a world away, would be saved. But here's what nobody tells you about that night. The man who won the war for Harlem, he wasn't even in the room. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, the gangster who would become Harlem's uncrowned king, wasn't at Palace Chop House on October 24th, 1935. He didn't plan the assassination. He didn't pull the trigger. He didn't orchestrate the hit that ended Dutch Schultz's invasion of Harlem. He just waited and won. Every gangster war has a battlefield. This one had a chop house 30 miles from the prize. And the victor? He never showed up. Was Bumpy Johnson lucky? Or was he brilliant? Did he know what was coming? Or did fate hand him the greatest victory in black organized crime history? This is the story of how Harlem won its war without firing a shot. How a murder in Newark became liberation in Harlem. And why the man who benefited most wasn't even there. Because sometimes the best war is the one you don't fight. Before we get to why Dutch Schultz died, you need to understand why he was dangerous. 1933 to 1935, the Dutchman's expansion. His name was Arthur Flegenheimer. Born in the Bronx, 1901, Jewish immigrant family, father left when Arthur was 14, worked as a printer, then a roofer. But legitimate work didn't pay, not in the Bronx. Not in the 1920s, so Arthur Flegenheimer invented a new man, Dutch Schultz, the Dutchman, a name that sounded dangerous, a persona that delivered. He was brutal and shrewd, killed rivals in basement rooms and beat tax evasion charges through brilliant accounting, crude in person but sophisticated in operation, a downtown power who wanted uptown territory. And in 1933, Dutch Schultz looked at Harlem and saw an opportunity. The numbers racket, that's what he wanted. You need to understand what the numbers racket was. It was a daily lottery. You pick 3 digits. If your numbers hit, based on stock market results or racetrack totals, you won. Small bets. A nickel, a dime, a quarter. But multiply those nickels by thousands of bettors every single day, and you had an empire. In Harlem in 1935, the numbers racket generated roughly $20 million a year. $20 million in 1935 dollars. That's over $400 million today. And here's what mattered. It was the only black-owned business in Harlem that made real money. Black Wall Street before there was a Black Wall Street. The numbers funded everything. Funeral homes, nightclubs, real estate, community loans, church donations. The entire underground economy of Harlem ran on numbers money. Dutch Schultz looked at $20 million and asked himself one question: why let them keep it? So in 1933, he invaded. His tactics were simple: offer protection. Translation: pay me or I shut you down. Use police connections. He had Irish cops on his payroll. Arrest your competitors. Leave my operation alone. And if you resist, violence. Quick, public, terrifying. One by one, Harlem's independent numbers bankers fell. Some submitted, some fled, some died. By 1935, Dutch Schultz controlled an estimated 60% of Harlem's numbers racket. But there was resistance. Stephanie St. Clair. Queenie, a black woman who ran one of Harlem's largest numbers banks. She fought back, refused to submit, hired muscle to protect her operation. One of those enforcers was a young gangster named Ellsworth Johnson, Bumpy. But by September 1935, everyone in Harlem understood the reality. Dutch was too connected, too violent, too rich. The question wasn't whether Dutch would take over completely. The question was when. Harlem asked. Can we stop him? The answer from Harlem, no, he's too powerful. The answer from downtown, someone can, but not you. They were half right. Statistics don't capture it. $20 million is just a number. But Harlem in 1935, that was people, real people, living under occupation. September 1935, 1 month before everything changed. These aren't direct historical accounts. Records from Black Harlem in 1935 are sparse, fragmentary, lost. But based on documented economic patterns, oral histories, and the lived reality of that time, this reflects what the community experienced. There was a numbers runner. Let's call him Marcus. 28 years old. He'd collected bets on street corners for years. Used to work for a black banker, made decent money, kept most of it in the neighborhood. But by September 1935, Marcus worked for Dutch Schultz's operation. Not by choice. Same job, different boss, same street corners. But now the money went to the Bronx, not 125th Street. Dutch's collectors took 50%. Under the black bankers, they had taken 30%. That 20-point difference meant less money circulating in Harlem, less money for rent, less money for food, less money for businesses. Marcus saw it every day, and he understood what it meant. We're funding our own oppression. If he skimmed even $1, he'd disappear. That was the rule, Dutch's rule. There was a shop owner, Mrs. Washington, 52 years old, ran a grocery store on Lenox Avenue. For decades, she'd watched Harlem's rhythm. She knew when things changed, and in 1935, everything was changing. Her customers had less money. Dutch's operation took more from them, left less for necessities. There were more police around, but they weren't protecting anyone. They were protecting Dutch's numbers runners from competition. People whispered now, afraid to speak openly, afraid someone might report them. Mrs. Washington noticed something else. Under the black bankers, numbers money had circulated back into Harlem. A winning bettor might invest in a small business. A banker might fund a church renovation. The money stayed in the community. But Dutch's operation, pure extraction. Money flowed north to the Bronx and never came back. She asked herself every night, what happens when there's nothing left to take? There was a minister, Reverend James Powell, 45 years old. He saw it from the pulpit every Sunday. Congregation donations were down. People were betting on numbers instead of tithing to the church. He understood why. Numbers was their stock market, the only game they could play. The legitimate economy was closed to black Americans. No bank loans, no business opportunities, no stock portfolios, just numbers. But Dutch had rigged the game against them. Worse odds, higher house cut, delayed payouts. Reverend Powell faced a moral paradox. Gambling was sin. But the legitimate economy was sin too, the sin of exclusion, segregation, systematic theft. Numbers was the only path to wealth, so was it really sin? Or was it survival? He prayed, Lord, we need a miracle, or a gangster of our own. And there was Bumpy Johnson, 30 years old, in September 1935, working as muscle for Stephanie St. Clair, watching, calculating, thinking. You can't fight Dutch head-on, too connected. You can't negotiate. He doesn't respect black businessmen. You can't outlast him. He has infinite resources. So what do? Bumpy didn't have an answer yet, but he was watching Dutch carefully. Watching how Dutch behaved, erratic, violent, drawing too much attention, making enemies not just in Harlem but downtown. In the commission, Bumpy thought, there's no winning move, not directly, except one. Wait for Dutch to destroy himself. September 1935. Harlem held its breath. Everyone knew something had to give. The options they saw were simple. submit completely, resist and die, hope for a miracle. Nobody imagined the fourth option, that someone else would kill Dutch, someone who didn't care about Harlem at all. Why would they imagine that? That's mob business. The commission doesn't kill people over black neighborhoods. We're not worth a mob war. They were wrong. October 24th, 1935. 10 p.m. Two worlds existing simultaneously. Harlem. People going about their lives. Heading home from work. Closing shops. Gathering in churches for evening services. The rhythm of a Thursday night. Newark, New Jersey. Palace Chop House filling with dinner customers. A small restaurant, working-class clientele. Nothing special. Except in the back room, 4 men were playing cards. In 15 minutes, one world would end. Another would be reborn. The back room of Palace Chop House. Checkered tablecloths, poor lighting. A bathroom near the back exit. The front door had a clear sight line straight to where they sat. 4 men at the table. Dutch Schultz, 33 years old, multimillionaire, beer baron turned numbers king. Otto Abadaba Berman, 42. Dutch's accountant, a mathematical genius who could calculate numbers, racket odds in his head. Abe Landau, 26. Bodyguard, loyal, alert. Bernard Lulu Rosenkrantz, 28. Driver and bodyguard. They were playing cards, discussing business, laughing. Dutch was in a good mood. They didn't know that outside. Charlie the Bug Workman was parking his car, or that Emmanuel Mendy Weiss was with him, or that the commission had sent them, or that no warning would come. 10:14 p.m. The front door opened. Workman entered. Calm, purposeful. He looked like any other customer. The dinner crowd didn't react. Weiss stayed by the door. Look out. Workman walked toward the back room. 10:15 p.m. He saw Dutch at the table. Raised his gun. No word spoken. No warning given. First shot. Dutch hit in the chest. He fell forward. Chaos erupted. Landau went for his gun. Shot in the back before he could draw. He fell. Rosenkrantz returned fire. Wounded but still shooting. Trying to protect Dutch. Berman frozen at the table. Shot where he sat. Workman ran toward the bathroom. Found Dutch. The Dutchman had crawled there. Second shot. Close range. Then Workman fled. 10:16 p.m. Silence. Gun smoke thick in the air. 4 men down on the floor. Screaming from the dining room. Customers running. Workman and Weiss gone. Disappeared into the Newark night. Police arrived at 10:20 p.m. Ambulance at 10:25. All 4 men rushed to Newark City Hospital. Dutch was still alive. Barely. Delirious. Rambling. Making no sense. A stenographer was called to record his words. Standard police practice. Maybe he'd confess. Maybe he'd name his killers. But Dutch just rambled. Famous last words that meant nothing. A boy has never wept, nor dashed 1,000 kim. Nonsense. Delirium. The morphine and the dying speaking through him. Doctors gave him maybe 24 hours. Meanwhile, 10:30 p.m. in Harlem, 30 miles north. People didn't know. Couldn't know. News traveled slow in 1935. No internet. No instant updates. Just word of mouth in tomorrow's newspapers. Numbers runners were collecting final bets for the day. Stores were locking their doors. Churches were dismissing evening services. Somewhere in Harlem, Bumpy Johnson was going about his business. We don't know exactly where. History didn't record that detail. Life continued as normal. In 8 hours, news would arrive. In 22 hours, Dutch would be dead. In 48 hours, everything would change. But right now, at 10:30 p.m. on October 24, 1935, Harlem didn't know that liberation was already theirs, that the war was over, that the invasion had ended. Not yet. In Newark City Hospital, Dutch Schultz lay dying. Stenographer at his bedside. Family called, lawyers called, but no salvation coming. The internal bleeding was too severe. The Dutchman had hours, maybe less, 2 worlds. Newark, an empire dying in a hospital bed. Harlem, a community unaware that their oppressor was already dead, just didn't know it yet. History was turning. But history moves slow at first. Then all at once, October 25th, 1935. 6 a.m., Harlem waking up, a normal Friday morning, people heading to work, children getting ready for school. Nobody knew yet. The news was coming, like dawn, inevitable but not yet arrived. 7:30 a.m. Police radio traffic mentioned a shooting in Newark, a name, Dutch Schultz. The news reached newspaper offices in Manhattan. Reporters at the Amsterdam News and the New York Age heard it. Amsterdam News served Harlem's black community. This was their story. First reaction, verify. Phone calls to Newark. Newark police confirmed it. Dutch Schultz shot. Critical condition, not dead yet, but close. The first Harlem residents to hear were numbers runners grabbing breakfast at corner diners, whispers before the shout. 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., the news spread. Barbershops, always the first stop for Harlem news, men gathering for morning shaves, radio playing in the background. Then the announcement, Dutch Schultz shot in Newark. Multiple gunmen, not expected to survive. Reactions mixed. No way. When? Who did it? Speculation began immediately. Italian mob, the commission, rival bootleggers. One thing everyone agreed on. Whoever did it, they did Harlem a favor. On street corners, numbers runners spread the news. Don't collect today. Dutch is dying. Questions followed. What happens to his operation? What if someone worse takes over? Fear and hope tangled together. In churches, ministers heard from parishioners arriving early for Friday services. Prayers of what? Thanksgiving? Guilt? Can you celebrate death? Reverend Powell's response when asked, "We don't celebrate murder, we acknowledge deliverance." 10:30 a.m. Marcus, the numbers runner, got a phone call from Dutch's operation. Stand down today? Don't collect. The organization was in chaos. Relief washed over Marcus like baptism. For the first time in 18 months, he didn't have to report to Dutch's collectors. Didn't have to hand over 50%. He looked at the day's betting slips in his pocket. Small temptation. Keep the money for himself? No. He decided to take them to Mrs. St. Clair, Stephanie's operation, a small act of reclamation. Choosing his community over chaos, but he couldn't quite believe it yet. Is this permanent or just a pause? Noon, Mrs. Washington's grocery store on Lenox Avenue. Customers coming in all morning, everyone talking about Dutch. The New York Times arrived. Front page, Dutch Schultz, shot, near death. She read it aloud to customers gathered in her store. One detail struck her. Shot at Palace Chop House, Newark. Newark, not even here. Not Harlem. Someone else fought our battle. She felt gratitude mixed with something else. Shame? We couldn't save ourselves. Someone else had to do it. 2:20 p.m. Bumpy Johnson heard the news mid-morning. We don't know exactly how, but his reaction, based on later accounts, was calm, strategic. He didn't celebrate publicly, didn't claim credit. He watched and waited. His internal calculation went like this. Dutch's operation will collapse. His men will scatter. Territory will open up. But who ordered the hit? The commission. So what's their next move? He met with Stephanie St. Clair. Strategy session. Their approach. Don't rush in. Don't appear opportunistic. Let the dust settle. Vultures get shot. Statesmen negotiate. 6 p.m. Still no official death announcement. Dutch was hanging on. But Harlem knew he wasn't coming back. That evening's numbers game ran differently. People placed their bets. This time, the money stayed in Harlem. Dutch's collectors didn't show up. They were either fleeing or fighting over his empire's scraps. A small victory, a feeling in the air, maybe we get our kingdom back. But careful optimism. Harlem had been disappointed before. Midnight. October 25th, 1935. Dutch Schultz died around this time. The exact hour is disputed in historical sources. Some say late on the 24th, some say early on the 25th. Somewhere around midnight, the Dutchman's heart stopped. Harlem didn't know the exact moment, but they felt it, like a weightlifting, like being able to breathe again. The invasion was over. Now came the question, what happens next? Harlem celebrated deliverance. But who delivered them? The answer wasn't Bumpy Johnson. It was a man who'd never set foot in Harlem, a man who didn't care about black neighborhoods or community autonomy or numbers rackets in Uptown. Lucky Luciano killed Dutch Schultz for one reason: business. Salvatore Lucania, born in Sicily, 1897, came to New York as a child, grew up on the Lower East Side, rose through the mob ranks the hard way. Violence, cunning, vision. But Luciano's genius wasn't violence. It was organization. The old way of running organized crime was feudal. Bosses ruled by fear, honor, and tradition. Territories were personal fiefdoms, disputes were settled by war, and wars were expensive, bloody, destructive. Luciano looked at that system and thought, there's a better way. Organize crime like business. The Castellamarese War had been raging for 18 months. Two old-world bosses fighting for control of New York's Italian underworld, Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano. Dozens dead, families caught in crossfire, the entire structure was collapsing. Luciano's solution: kill both of them. April 15, 1931. Joe Masseria shot dead at a Coney Island restaurant. Luciano arranged it. September 10, 1931. Salvatore Maranzano killed in his Park Avenue office. Luciano arranged that too. And then Luciano did something revolutionary. He created the commission. Think of it as a board of directors for organized crime. Members, the heads of New York's 5 families plus representatives from other cities, Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, a national network. The rules were simple. No killing bosses without a vote. Territories are respected, disputes are arbitrated, business comes before vendetta. Why did it work? Because profitable peace beats chaotic war. Every time. The commission lasted for decades, still exists in modified form today. It changed everything. And the key principle was this: the commission decides, the families execute. Dutch Schultz's fatal flaw: he refused to follow commission rules. Dutch was brilliant, made millions in beer during Prohibition, transitioned to numbers after Prohibition ended, built a genuine empire. But he was a terrible diplomat, couldn't play politics, couldn't keep his ego in check. Problem number 1, Dutch wanted to kill prosecutor Thomas Dewey. Thomas Dewey was investigating Dutch for tax evasion. Dutch's solution: murder him. Kill a prosecutor. Eliminate the threat. The commission's response: are you insane? Killing a prosecutor would bring unprecedented heat on all the families. Federal investigations, crackdowns, media frenzy. The whole system would collapse because Dutch couldn't handle one prosecutor. The commission told him, stand down, take the trial, beat it in court like you've done before. Dutch refused, said he was moving forward with the hit. Problem number 2, Dutch was erratic, violent in public, beat people where witnesses could see, cheated other families out of their cuts, expanded into territories without permission, violated every rule of the new system. Summer 1935. The commission voted. Should Dutch Schultz live? The vote: no. The reason: he's bad for business. The order: Charlie Workman executes. October 24, 1935. Order executed. Here's the irony. The commission didn't kill Dutch to save Harlem. They killed him because he was going to kill Thomas Dewey. Harlem's liberation was an accidental byproduct, a side effect of a completely different calculation. Why didn't the Commission care about Harlem? Simple. The Commission was 5 Italian families. Harlem was black territory. No overlap, no conflict of interest. Actually, the Commission preferred that black operators kept Harlem. Why? Less conflict. If Italian families fought over Harlem, that meant internal wars, commission wars, expensive, destabilizing. The Commission's informal policy on Harlem: let black numbers operators run it. Italians supply drugs, take a cut from major operators. Everyone makes money. No wars. Stay in your lane. Dutch violated that policy, tried to take over Harlem completely, created conflict with Stephanie St. Clair and Bumpy Johnson. But here's the thing. The Commission didn't care about that. They cared that Dutch's overall behavior threatened the system. His Harlem invasion was just one symptom of his larger instability. So when the Commission killed Dutch, they weren't rescuing Harlem. They were removing a problem. Harlem's freedom was just collateral benefit. Lucky Luciano's perspective. Problem solved. Dewey investigation continues, but the prosecutor stays alive. No heat on the families. Dutch's territory gets redistributed to reliable operators. Harlem? The Commission doesn't care. Let the black gangsters have it. One less headache. Benefit to Luciano. Stability restored. Benefit to Harlem. Independence preserved. Benefit to Bumpy Johnson. His most dangerous competitor eliminated. So, Harlem was saved, but not rescued. Saved implies intention. Rescued implies care. This was neither. Harlem was a side effect. The real story, a business decision that happened to liberate a community. Bumpy Johnson understood this perfectly. Now came his move, October 24th, 1935. 10:15 p.m. 4 men shot in Newark. Bumpy Johnson wasn't there. Why? Not because he didn't care about Harlem, not because he couldn't have tried to kill Dutch himself, but because he understood something most gangsters never learn. The best victory is the one where your enemy defeats himself. Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, born 1905, Charleston, South Carolina. Moved to Harlem in 1919, age 14. Got his street name Bumpy from a knot on the back of his head, legacy of a childhood fight. By 1935, Bumpy was 30 years old. His position, enforcer for Stephanie St. Clair, Harlem's most powerful numbers banker. Known for intelligence and controlled violence, not yet a kingpin. That would come in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, but already building a reputation. Respected in the community, feared by rivals. His key trait, strategic patience. Bumpy had learned a lesson watching Harlem gangsters before him. The ones who fought Italian mobs head-on, they died. Every time. The system was rigged. Police worked for the Italians. Courts worked for the Italians. City Hall worked for the Italians. You couldn't win by fighting. Bumpy's innovation. Don't fight battles you can't win. Wait for opportunities. So when Dutch Schultz invaded Harlem in 1933, Bumpy calculated his options. Option 1, direct confrontation, assassinate Dutch. The result? Dutch's organization retaliates. The Italian mob backs Dutch because the Commission hasn't turned on him yet. Bumpy dies. Harlem loses anyway. Option 2, appeal to the Commission. Ask Lucky Luciano to intervene. Stop Dutch from taking over Harlem. The result? Why would the Commission care about Harlem? They don't intervene in lower-tier territorial disputes, and Bumpy lacks the clout to demand an audience. Option 3, organize community resistance. Unite all the black numbers bankers. Refuse Dutch's takeover collectively. The result? Dutch uses his police connections, arrests, raids, shutdowns. The legal system crushes resistance. All 3 options lead to defeat. Bumpy's insight, there's no winning move, not directly, except one. Wait for Dutch to destroy himself. So what did Bumpy actually do? Strategy, defensive positioning plus intelligence gathering. Step 1. Protect key operators. Work as muscle for Stephanie St. Clair. Ensure Dutch couldn't kill her. Keep resistance alive without escalating to full war. Step 2. Study the enemy. Watch Dutch's behavior carefully. Notice he's erratic, violent, drawing too much attention. Understand that the Commission hates instability. Calculate that Dutch is living on borrowed time. Step 3. Prepare for the aftermath. Build relationships in the community. Position himself as protector, not aggressor. Ensure that when Dutch's territory opened up, he'd be ready to claim it. But don't act prematurely. Step 4. When news arrived October 25th, don't celebrate publicly. Don't claim credit. Don't rush to grab territory. Wait to see who ordered the hit, what comes next. Step 5. Negotiate with the Commission. After Dutch died, Bumpy's move was diplomatic. Reach an understanding with the 5 families. Terms: Harlem numbers stay black-controlled. Italians supply drugs, take their distribution cut. No direct Italian takeover attempts. Mutual profit, separate territories. Result: Harlem autonomy maintained through the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. The hardest part of Bumpy's strategy was the waiting, not acting when the community pressured him. September 1935. People asking, "What are you going to do about Dutch?" Bumpy's reported response: "Nothing. Yet." To some it looked like cowardice, to others weakness, but it was strategic genius. Bumpy understood something crucial. I don't need to kill Dutch, I need Dutch dead. Those are different things. One makes me a target, one makes me a king. The art of patience, knowing when not to fight, trusting that unstable systems correct themselves. Dutch's recklessness was his own death sentence. The Commission's business logic was Bumpy's opportunity. There's an American saying, "Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake." Bumpy Johnson lived it. But here's the moral complexity. Is Bumpy good because he didn't kill Dutch, or is he guilty for benefiting from murder? Community perspective, hero, Harlem was saved. Ethical perspective, beneficiary of a mob hit. Bumpy's likely view, based on everything we know about how he operated. Morality is a luxury of those with power. I had no power to stop Dutch legally. I had no power to kill him safely. I had only the power to wait and capitalize. That's not murder, that's survival. The system created the situation. Bumpy navigated the system. Is that villainy or brilliance? Answer: both. Neither. Depends who you ask. October 24th, 1935 changed Bumpy Johnson's life. But he didn't fire a shot. Didn't plan the hit. Didn't even know it was coming. He just understood the game better than anyone else. And when opportunity knocked, he was ready. That's the difference between a gangster and a king. Kings know when to let others do the fighting. Dutch Schultz died October 24th, 1935. But the story didn't end there. Because what happened next, or rather what didn't happen next, made Harlem unique in American organized crime history. Harlem remained Harlem, black-controlled, community-rooted, autonomous, for 3 more decades. The pattern from 1935 to 1968. Post-Dutch era, Bumpy Johnson rises. 1945 to 1960s, Bumpy at peak power. Controls numbers and other rackets in Harlem. Italian families supply drugs but don't control Harlem streets. Police corruption exists, but Harlem operators pay Harlem cops. Money circulates in Harlem. Funds hotels, nightclubs, businesses. Key fact: no Italian family ever took over Harlem completely. The Genovese family tried in the 1940s, failed. The Lucchese family tried in the 1950s, failed. Why? Bumpy plus community resistance plus commission pragmatism. Result: Harlem's black economy, both illegal and legal, stayed black-controlled. the funeral homes, the nightclubs, Cotton Club era, later Small's Paradise, real estate. Numbers money funded all of it. Compare this to what happened elsewhere in America. Chicago St. Valentine's Day Massacre, February 14, 1929. Al Capone versus Bugs Moran. Total war. Black neighborhoods on the South Side caught in crossfire. The Italian outfit eventually controlled everything. Black operators marginalized completely by the 1940s. Philadelphia, black numbers operators thrived in the 1930s and 40s. Then the Angelo Bruno family took over in the 1950s. Used violence, police connections, political power. Black operators forced out or killed. Detroit. The Purple Gang, mostly Jewish, controlled the 1920s and 30s. The Italian partnership took over in the 1940s. Black operators like the Cleaners and Dyers Gang crushed. No sustained black autonomy. New York, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, the five families dominated completely. Black criminals existed, but always subordinate. No independent black territories, only Harlem maintained autonomy. Why? Geography. Harlem is uptown, separated from Italian downtown by Central Park. Natural buffer. Out of sight, out of mind for Italian bosses. Not worth constant war to control. Demographics. Harlem was overwhelmingly black after the Great Migration of the 1920s and 30s. Italian operators would need black enforcers to control a black community. Culturally difficult, trust issues. The Commission's preference: let black bosses handle the black community. Economics. The numbers racket was the only thing really worth taking from Harlem. But numbers relied on community trust. Black bettors wouldn't bet with Italian operators. Cultural resistance. Profit calculation for the Italians. Better to tax black operators than try to run it yourself. Leadership. Stephanie St. Clair in the 1930s fought back effectively. Bumpy Johnson in the 1940s through 60s negotiated smartly. Later, Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes in the 1970s, different era entirely. But there was continuity of strong black leadership. And here's the paradox: systemic racism. Segregation created separate economies. Harlem functioned as a black city within a white city. The illegal economy mirrored the legal economy's segregation. And white crime families used racism to justify letting Harlem stay black. Let them have their own thing. Racist logic, but it resulted in autonomy. The irony is thick. Harlem's autonomy depended on the Commission's business logic. Don't fight unprofitable wars. It depended on systemic racism, separate but equal criminal economies. It depended on strategic leadership from people like Bumpy. It depended on community solidarity. Better staying loyal to black operators. None of these factors are heroic. All are compromises with oppression. But the result? Harlem controlled its own underground economy. And that money funded black businesses, black culture, black power. Was it a necessary evil or a survival strategy? Depends who you ask. October 24th, 1935 wasn't just the night Dutch Schultz died. It was the night Harlem earned its independence. Not through revolution, through patience, strategy, and, yes, luck. That independence lasted 3 decades, until drugs and federal prosecution destroyed it in the 1970s. But for one generation, Harlem was a kingdom, and Bumpy Johnson was its uncrowned king. We've talked about strategy, power, territory. We've analyzed systems and celebrated Harlem's survival. But we haven't talked enough about this. October 24th, 1935, 4 men were shot. All 4 died. They were human beings. This is their story. Dutch Schultz, born Arthur Flegenheimer, 1901, the Bronx, Jewish immigrant family. Father abandoned them when Arthur was 14. He worked legitimate jobs first, printer, roofer. But poverty pushed him toward crime. Burglary, then bootlegging. He built an empire through intelligence and ruthlessness. By 1935, 33 years old, multi-millionaire, he had a wife, Frances, 2 children. His final hours are documented. Shot at 10:15 p.m., lingered in the hospital roughly 14 hours, delirious, rambling. His last words were recorded by a police stenographer, hoping for a confession or information. But Dutch just spoke nonsense. A boy has never wept nor dashed 1,000 Kim. You can play jacks and girls do that with a soft ball. Morphine and dying. His family was at his bedside. He died afraid, in pain, confused. One human detail stands out. Dutch feared the IRS more than rival gangsters, kept obsessively complex financial records, wore cheap suits despite his wealth. A contradiction to the end. Otto Abadaba Berman, 42 years old, Dutch's accountant and mathematical genius. His nickname, Abadaba, was nonsense, almost playful. His skill, he calculated numbers, racket odds in his head faster than any machine. Would delay results reporting until the last possible minute, then manipulate the payouts to maximize Dutch's profit. Saved Dutch millions. Personal life, quiet, bookish. Unusual in the mob world, no criminal record before Dutch hired him. Just a math genius in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was shot at the table, working when the bullets came, died hours later in hospital. His last words, according to witnesses, don't. To someone, unclear who or what, just don't. The irony, killed for being good at his job. The tragedy, a nonviolent man in a violent world. Abe Landau, 26 years old, bodyguard for Dutch, known for loyalty, stayed when others fled. Background, Lower East Side, tough kid, shot in the back trying to draw his gun, fought to stay conscious, tried to return fire, died in the ambulance. Human detail, he was engaged to be married, wedding planned for the next month. His fiancée never married after his death. His mother held an Orthodox Jewish funeral service. Young man, violent profession, died of violent death. The calculus of crime. Loyalty equals death sentence. Bernard Lulu Rosenkrantz, 28 years old, bodyguard and driver for Dutch, the only one who successfully returned fire at the shooters, wounded but kept fighting, helped others despite his injuries, died last of the 4 the next day. Stomach wounds, the most painful death. Personal detail, he had family in the Bronx, sent money to his mother every week, dutiful son, killer for hire. Both things true simultaneously. 4 funerals in 1 week. Widows, children, mothers. Orthodox Jewish services for all 4. Their communities, the Bronx, Lower East Side. The shame, my husband was a gangster. The poverty, illegal wealth doesn't transfer legally. Children grew up without fathers. These weren't statistics. They were families destroyed. For what? Business, territory, ego. Harlem celebrated October 25th, 1935. Rightfully so. The threat had ended, but in the Bronx, there was mourning. Can both be true? Yes. The complexity. Dutch was a villain to Harlem. Dutch was a father to his children. Dutch's death saved a community. Dutch's death orphaned children. There's no clean math here. Liberation plus grief equals the American crime story. Nobody wins cleanly. Somebody always bleeds. 4 men died, October 24th, 1935. Harlem lived because of it. That's the truth, all of it. The victory and the cost. The freedom and the blood. History is never clean. October 24th, 1935. 10:15 p.m. Palace Chop House, Newark, New Jersey. We're back where we started. Checkered tablecloths, card game, cigarette smoke, gunfire. 4 men shot. 1 empire ended. 1 community saved. And 30 miles north in Harlem, a man who wasn't there won the war. Now we know why. Why wasn't Bumpy Johnson at Palace Chop House October 24th, 1935? Because he understood what most gangsters never learn. The best war is the one you don't fight. The best victory is the one someone else wins for you. The best strategy is patience. Bumpy didn't kill Dutch Schultz. Lucky Luciano did that. Ordered it through the commission. Bumpy didn't plan the assassination. The commission did that. Voting in summer 1935. Bumpy didn't rescue Harlem. Dutch's own recklessness rescued Harlem. What did Bumpy do? He waited, he prepared, he capitalized. That's not heroism, that's mastery. What did October 24th, 1935 mean? For Dutch Schultz, the end of an empire, the end of a life. Lesson: you can't fight the system when you are the problem. For Lucky Luciano and the commission, a business decision executed, unstable element removed, message sent, follow the rules or die. Proof that the commission system worked. For Harlem, accidental liberation. The invasion ended. Territory reclaimed. 30-plus years of autonomy earned. For Bumpy Johnson, vindication of patience. Path to power opened. Lesson learned that strategic thinking beats violence. Beginning of a legend. For history, an example of how power really works. Not through heroes, through systems, not through violence, through calculation, not through justice, through opportunity. But here's what still haunts this story. Who's the criminal in this narrative? Dutch. He invaded a community, extorted people, murdered rivals. Luciano, he ordered an assassination, ran a criminal syndicate. Bumpy, he benefited from murder, ran an illegal empire afterward. The commission? Organized crime at the highest level. Or was it the legal system? Racist, corrupt, systematically excluded Black Americans from the legitimate economy, forcing them into illegal alternatives to survive. Here's the complexity. Dutch was a criminal, but the system that excluded Black people from legal business created the need for the Black numbers racket in the first place. Luciano was a criminal, but he killed Dutch partly to prevent a prosecutor's murder, which the authorities couldn't prevent themselves. Bumpy was a criminal, but he protected a community that the legal system had abandoned. The real criminal? The system that made all of this necessary. We're still living with these questions. Communities still marginalized. Underground economies still exist where legal economies exclude people. Leaders still emerge from illegal spaces because legal spaces won't have them. We still celebrate complicated heroes. We still debate criminal or community protector. October 24th, 1935 is history. But the system that created that night? Still here. Different forms. Same structure. We're still asking, who's the real criminal when the system is the crime? If this story changed how you think about heroes and villains, if it complicated your understanding of justice, if it made you question who we call criminal and why, then it did what history should do, not give answers, ask better questions. Bumpy Johnson wasn't a hero, but he wasn't just a villain either. He was a man navigating an unjust system. And on October 24th, 1935, he won. Bumpy went on to rule Harlem for 3 decades, died in 1968, age 62 of a heart attack. Never spent significant time in prison for violence, protected the community, controlled vice, maintained order. The legend grew after his death. Now he's the subject of movies, TV shows, books. But it all started October 24th, 1935, the night he won without fighting. The night Dutch Schultz died and Harlem lived. The night that proved sometimes the villain's death is the hero's victory. And the hero doesn't need to pull the trigger. This is just one story from Harlem's underworld. There are hundreds more. Stephanie St. Clair's war with Dutch before this night. Bumpy's later conflicts with the Genovese family. The drug wars of the 1970s that ended the kingdom. We'll tell those stories too, because Harlem's history is America's history, hidden, complicated, essential. October 24th, 1935 started in Newark, but it ended in Harlem, with a community exhaling and a king rising. This is Harlem Chronicles, where we tell the stories they don't teach in school, the complicated, uncomfortable, true stories. Rest in power, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, and rest in peace, all who fell that night.